So let's all just take a deep breath together as we move into this part of our service. As you know, this month we're talking about living the contemplative life, living the contemplative life, living that life of reflection, that life of introspection, that life of prayer, of meditation, of contemplation, and how we can move through these unprecedented times by really developing a contemplative life and learning to live a contemplative life. And so one of the great things was last Tuesday when we had the connection meeting, we talked about what that means for the different people who were there on Tuesday evening and how lives have begun to change, just beginning to live the contemplative life, living more in a contemplative space. And because we aren't quite as busy and quite as doing as much as we have been used to doing in our lives, we have more of an opportunity to just move into that place of contemplation, meditation, prayer, and just centeredness, a life of centeredness. And it was really refreshing to hear how many people have begun to really practice this contemplative life thing and how it is beginning to work in all of our lives. And so I'm inviting you again this week to really, really consider living the contemplative life and to recognize that what that means also is change. We have to change in order to live a contemplative life. And you may be saying, oh, just what I need, just one more change. No, it really is a change for the better. It's a change for the better. It gives us a chance to really begin to learn to live a life of oneness, to live a life of oneness, to live a life that is different than the life we've lived before, because life is different than the life we've had before. So just moving into the place of consciously choosing a life that's different, a life that's easier, a life that has more flow, a life that has us more in the flow is what the contemplative life is all about. And so today what I'm focusing on, our topic is God in action. God in action. God in action. You know, God is always in action. The action of God is always taking place, always right where we are, always happening. The action of God, the activity of God is always taking place. But you know, it happens so always. I want to say so frequently, but it's even more frequent than that, than frequent. It's always happening. So much so that we fail to recognize it sometimes. We take it for granted sometimes. We're not even aware of it sometimes. Because, you know, God is always working. God works through God shows up. God works through people, through places, through things, through situations and circumstances and events. God works through everything. God shows up in everything. And when I use the term show up, I don't mean that God is just showing up from outside someplace or just stopping by sometimes. I mean, it's showing up in the sense that God is always here. God is always right where we are. God is. And the showing up part happens in our own consciousness. We become aware of it because of what's happening in our own consciousness, because of the expansion that's happening in our own consciousness. That's what I mean when I say God shows up, because God just is. And we become aware of it. It seems like, oh, God is showing up here. And it's like, no, God just is. And we become aware. We're more open to it. We've taken the blinders off. We get a chance to see, to sense, to feel the presence of God. We get a chance to see, to sense, to feel the action of God, the activity of God. And so I'm inviting you today, just as you just take a breath, to just look at a couple of things I'm inviting you to do, just to be aware of. To be aware of God's activity, to be aware of God in action. And that's the first thing I want you to do, is to become aware of, develop the ability to see God in action. Develop the ability to just recognize God in action. You know, God is in action when we see unity instead of separation, when we see people coming together, working together toward a common goal for good. That's God in action. When we see birds flying a perfect pattern, that's God in action. That's God in action. When we see demonstrations from spiritual mind treatments, from our prayers, when we see answered prayer, that's God in action. Just so many things, so many ways we are seeing God in action in our lives. And what we want to do is to develop the ability to see that, to recognize that. Random acts of kindness, That's God in action. Compassion. When we begin to show more and more compassion for each other, we begin to recognize that each of us is here to discover our own divinity. We are discovering our own divinity as we go along. So when we start to extend a hand to another rather than pointing a finger, that's God in action. That's God in action, extending a hand rather than pointing a finger, having compassion rather than condemnation and criticism. That's God in action. That's how God works always. That's how God is always. God is compassion itself. And so when we start to recognize that and start to allow it to become a part of our lives and start to see it in others, we are touching into that divinity within each one of us. And as we touch into that divinity, that is our very own divinity, that always is right where we are, then we're seeing God in action. We're seeing it again. We see it all around us. We see it in the healthcare workers throughout this time, the first responders throughout this time, the people who are showing up, helping others, the people who are helping to feed others, the teachers who are going back to school or who are teaching the kids online, whatever it is. It's God in action. That's God in action. And that's what we want to come to recognize more and more and more. We want to develop our consciousness to the point where we can say, look around us always and say, oh, wow, look at God in action. Look at how God's showing up here today. And what that means is look at how my consciousness is expanding so that I can see the isness that always is. The isness that is God and that is always right where we are and that is always in action. Always in action, God is always in action. And so as we develop this ability to see God in action, we also want to begin to recognize God in action in our own lives. God in action in our own lives, the little ways that God shows up in our own lives. As I said earlier, just recognizing demonstrations for our prayer, answered prayer, demonstrations for the spiritual mind treatments that we've either done or received. Just how our lives have changed, how things have been made better, how, just little things like if you have been trying to remember something that you can't remember, then all of a sudden it comes to you. That's God in action. If it's something that you've been expecting that didn't happen, and then all of a sudden it just seems like out of the clear, out of the blue, it just shows up. It just happens. It just happens, whatever it is. That's God in action. That's how God works. Just in so many ways, so many little ways in our lives, so many little ways, things you've been waiting, something you may have been waiting for in the mail, something you may have been waiting for, that check that hasn't come, or whatever it may be. That's God in action. God is always acting, always action. Raymond Charles Barker wrote a little booklet called Money is God in Action. Money is God in action. And he talks about money just being a form of circulation. It's just circulating, and how God is always moving, always circulating. God is circulating always acting, always moving. And so money is God in action. So many things, so many of our activities are God in action. So recognizing how that is showing up in our own lives in little ways that we take for granted. I'm reminded of a situation that I had. I'm sort of a dinosaur. Those of you who know me know that I'm sort of a dinosaur. So I still have a landline here at home. And on my landline, I have 2 cordless phones. And the trick is to keep one of them, at least one of them, on the charger at all times, so that I'll have a working phone. Well, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's just like me with glasses. I have 5 pairs of glasses, and sometimes I'm looking for a pair and I'll find all 5 of them in the same place. And I'm not quite sure why that happens like that. But at any rate, back to the phone story, that I had taken one of the phones off the hook and I couldn't find it. And so off the charger rather, and I couldn't find it. Old phones used to be on the hook. The new phones are on chargers. But at any rate, I'd taken it off the charger and I couldn't find it. And I must have looked for that phone for 2 weeks. And knowing that it was there, they had no charge to the battery by then. So there was no way that I could use the intercom to try to find it. And I was holding on to the one that I still had for dear life because I didn't know what I was going to do if I let that one go. If I put that one down and didn't know where I put it. So I walked around, as I said, for about 2 weeks looking for that phone, could not find it. And one day I just said in my morning prayer, I said, God, please tell me where my phone is. I know you know where my phone is. Just let me know where the phone is, please, so that I can put it back on the charger. And then I forgot about it. So later on in the day, I went back into my office and I was about to print some things off, and I had the one phone in my hand. So I put it on the charger there, and it's one of these little chargers. So I put it on the charger, and as soon as I put it on the charger, it fell off. And when it fell behind my desk. And so that meant I had to get down on the floor and crawl under the desk to get that phone up. And when I got down on the floor and crawled under the desk, the phone that had fallen was lying on top of the other phone that I couldn't find. And I just started to laugh because I realized that I had asked God to show me where that phone was. And I dropped one phone and it fell on top of the other phone. So I had to get down there and get it. And therefore, I found both phones. I still laugh about that when I think about it because I said, I asked and I received. That was God in action. That was God in action. And sometimes we just don't ask. Sometimes we'll walk around trying to do things ourselves. We'll walk around trying to figure things out ourselves. We'll walk around trying to get somebody else to do it or somebody else to figure it out, when all we have to do is just stop and take a breath and ask. Stop and take a breath and ask. Ask for help. Asking God for help. Asking others for help. Just ask, because God works through others also. So just asking for help, and that help comes to us whenever we ask. That help that we're asking for comes to us whenever we ask. We just have to be open to it. So I usually I have no problem asking God to help or show me or whatever. But for this phone, I don't know why I had not said that. I went around that long without asking, show me where that phone is, please. And as soon as I asked, the phone was there. The other phone was there. It was that seems like a little thing, but it's a reminder to me always that God is always in action in my life, that God is always helping, that God is always showing the way, that God is always showing up. And that same is true for you. That same is true for each of us. How is God showing up in your life? How is God showing up in little ways and big ways? And big ways. It may be healing in the body temple. It may be healing in a relationship. It may be comfort during a time of loss. It may be whatever it is we need, whatever it is we are in need of, we ask for help. We open ourselves to that action of God in our lives that is the answer to whatever it is we need, that is the solution to whatever problem we have, that is the answer to any question we may have about anything. That's what we do. We begin to recognize. We begin to recognize how God shows up in our lives. And when I say shows up, how God is in action in our lives always, 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 always. Did I say always? Always. God is in action in our lives always. And the thing for us to do is to keep that in mind, to look forward, to expect it, walk through life with expectancy. Expecting God to show up, expecting God to be in action, expecting prayer to be answered, expecting help to come, expecting abundance to flow, expecting good things to happen, have an expectancy of good as we walk through our lives. That's how God is showing up as that good that we are expecting, as whatever it is we're open to, as whatever we're expanding our consciousness to accept, as whatever it is we are available to, as whatever it is we're saying yes to. And so I'm inviting you, just take a breath and then really look at and recognize how God is showing up in my life, how God in action is showing up in my life right here and right now on this day. And then start to look for the little things, look at the little ways and give such great, great thanks for the little ways that God is in action in your life. And then the other thing that I want you to consider is priming your consciousness to be God in action. Priming your consciousness to be God in action. Take a deep breath on that one. priming your consciousness to be God in action. You know, we are each made in the image and likeness and out of God itself. And God is always working in and through and as us to the degree that we are at one with it, to the degree that we are open to it, to the degree that we are available to it, to work in and through and as us. That's the only way God can work for us, is by working through us and working as us. And so when God is working as us, that's God in action. That's God in action. When God is working as us, that's God in action. How powerful is that? How powerful is that? And how humbling that is. And how comforting that is to know that this is what oneness brings us. This is what oneness does for us. And so when we are in that place of beginning to live a life of contemplation, living a contemplative life, then we are in that place of healing that sense of separation that we have from God. We are in that place of really letting go of that sense of separation, because that's the only thing that ever needs to be healed anyway. We're letting go of that sense of separation. And we're moving into that place of oneness. And so here is what I'd like you to do, to really consider doing in priming your consciousness to be God in action, to be God in action, to be God in action in your own life. And this is a ritual that was recommended by Eric Butterworth in his book, Life is for Living, on which our theme for the year, Life is for Living, Just Say Yes, is based. But in his book, Eric Butterworth is talking about developing a consciousness of prayer, developing a prayer consciousness, a consciousness of openness and availability in just 10 golden minutes a day. That's how he phrases it, 10 golden minutes a day. Take 10 golden minutes a day to prime your consciousness to be God in action. And the way this works is the first 5 minutes in the morning and the last 5 minutes in the evening before falling off to sleep. First 5 minutes upon awakening in the morning and the last 5 minutes before going to sleep, developing a ritual so that you're consciously aware, you're consciously connected, you're consciously at one with the power and the presence of God. And so here's the way it works. The first 5 minutes in the morning, as soon as you open your eyes in the morning, take a deep breath. Take a deep breath and just say, thank you, God. Take a deep breath. Take 3 deep breaths as soon as you wake up in the morning, as soon as you open your eyes. And then do a modified spiritual mind treatment. As you open your eyes, you take 3 deep breaths and you say, there's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is my life now. Now, Ernest Holmes says, it's not just enough to say there's only one life, that life is God's life, and stop right there. No. He says that you have to complete the statement by saying that life is my life now. That coupling our lives with that life is the way that we get to express that life, the way that we get to express that life of God. So we start off with there's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is my life now. That's the recognition and unification steps of spiritual mind treatment. And so then you could, after that, just take a breath and then add another statement. I'm inviting you to encouraging you to say, I give thanks that everything is working together for good this day. I give thanks that everything is working together for good this day. I give thanks that everything is working together for good this day. When you're saying everything is working together for good, that's the realization step. And the I give thanks is a thanksgiving step. And then you take another breath and you just say, thank you, God. And I release, and so it is. So let me do that again. You open your eyes, you take a deep breath, you take another deep breath, and you take another deep breath. And then you say, there's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is my life now. I give thanks that everything is working together for good this day. I release and I allow it to be. And so it is. That is the way you want to start your day. Even if you're going to do big spiritual practice after, even if you're going to do full-blown spiritual mind treatment after, reading, journaling, prayer, meditation, do that after. But what you want to do is to start your first waking moments off with just being present and consciously connecting with that power and that presence that is right where you are, right then and there. Because once we get up, if you wait another half hour, another hour or so before you do your meditation, before you do your morning spiritual practice, then other things have interfered. Other things have come in. Other thoughts, other feelings, other concerns, other cares, or whatever have had a chance to come in and to establish a foothold in our consciousness for that day. But when we can wake up in the morning and just start out with, as soon as you open your eyes, even before you're fully awake, as soon as you open your eyes, taking a breath and recognizing there's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is my life now. I give thanks that everything is working together for good in my life this day. And so it is. And then after that, get up and go about your day. But you will feel a coming together of your entire being. You will feel a sense of oneness. You will feel a sense of groundedness that doesn't always happen when you first wake up in the mornings. And then you go about your day after that. You go about your day after that. And so then the last 5 minutes in the evening, the last 5 minutes before falling asleep, even if you read before bed or do whatever else before bed, the last 5 minutes before falling asleep, taking a breath, and doing the same thing. I know there's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is my life now. I give thanks that everything that needs to be done is already done in the mind of God. I relax, I release, and so it is. Last 5 minutes in bed at night. There's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is my life now. I give thanks that everything that needs to be done is already done in the mind of God. And so it is. When we go to bed at night, our dominant thought, our dominant intention is to rest and to sleep. To rest and to sleep. To rest and to sleep. That's the dominant intention of going to bed. I have a habit of going to bed and I call it getting in bed, and taking a book, taking a snack, taking the TV remote, taking my cell phone so I can play a little game, and doing all kinds of things when I get in bed at night. And interestingly, the last visioning that I did with the Vision Corps, one thing that came through very clearly, what do I need to embrace? In response to that question, what is God's vision for my life? In response to that question came, go to bed instead of getting in bed at night. Go to bed instead of getting in bed at night. Go to bed instead of getting in bed at night. There's a huge difference in that. In going to bed, I'm going to bed to rest and sleep. And I've been getting for a long time envisioning that I need to rest and sleep. I need to embrace rest and sleep. But when I get in bed, I'm not going to embrace rest and sleep, because when I get in bed, I'm going to play this little word game on my phone, and I'm going to watch a little TV, and I'm going to eat a little snack, and I'm going to maybe talk on the phone or whatever. That's getting in bed. But when I set my intention to go to bed, then I'm setting my intention to rest. I'm setting my intention to sleep. And I want to do that in oneness with the all that is. I want to do that in oneness with the all that is. And so now I am using this ritual that I mentioned to you. Just before falling asleep, without taking all that stuff to bed, just before falling asleep, there's only one life. That life is God's life. That life is my life now. I give thanks that everything that needs to be done is already done in the mind of God. I release, I relax, And so it is. And you know, when I do that, I don't go to sleep with what's been on the news in my mind. I don't go to sleep with whatever that game was or whatever the situation may be. I just fall asleep. And so I'm inviting you to develop a ritual for yourself. First 5 minutes in the morning, last 5 minutes at night. Develop a ritual for yourself and then practice it for 30 days. Practice it for 30 days. Practice it. Today is August 23rd. August 23rd. Practice it till September 23rd. Every morning, every evening. You can use the words I suggested, or you can create your own words. Create your own words, create your own ritual, but really stick to it. Really do those things and see how things begin to change. See how your day goes better. See how your sleep goes better. See how your life goes better. Because as you go through your daily life, we will be God in action. This is how we be God in action. Because we have connected upon awakening and we have connected upon falling asleep to the all that is. And when we do that, that all that is works through us as us, works through us as us. That's how we get to be God in action in everything we do. And so that's what I'm inviting you to do as you embark on these next 30 days. Develop a ritual and really stick to it. Really stick to it. Just like brushing your teeth, it's just a part of what you do when you wake up in the morning and when you go to sleep, just before falling asleep at night. And watch God in action in your life. And so let's take a breath together as we just move into prayer now. Just moving into that place of knowing and sensing and feeling this presence of God that is right where we are, right here, right now. Just moving into that place of knowing and sensing and feeling that presence that is the only life, the only mind, the only presence, the only that is God. And this onlyness that is God is my very life. This onlyness that is God is the life of each of us here this day. This onlyness that is God is that from which we can never be separate no matter what. No matter what, we can never be separate from this onlyness that is God. And so it's from this place of awareness, of this oneness with the all that is, I speak this word for each of us this day. Just speaking a word of wholeness. Speaking a word of wholeness, knowing that God is showing up as whatever it is we need in our lives on this day. Love and peace and harmony and joy and well-beingness. Healing in the body temple, healing in relationships, healing in our bodies of affairs. Protection and safety. Guidance and direction. Compassion, peace, harmony, balance, joy. Comfort for our grieving hearts, whatever it may be, that's contained within the wholeness that is. That's why I speak a word of wholeness for each of us this day. This prayer goes out to anyone needing a prayer this day. It goes out to the people in California and in Arizona who are affected by the wildfires, people who have lost homes, people who have lost loved ones, anyone who's affected by COVID-19 or other diseases. Other things that affect the body temple, those who are suffering from that and those who have lost loved ones. I know that God is right where each of them is. That God is showing up as safety, as protection, as comfort, as direction, as whatever is needed. God is showing up as that thing itself right here and right now. This is the truth that I know about this word that's being spoken here this day. That healing is happening everywhere. Even when we don't know what healing looks like, it's happening everywhere. It always is, because God is everywhere. And so this prayer goes out to anyone, anywhere needing a prayer this day, needing healing in their lives this day. And so as I open this circle of prayer, I pause momentarily so that you may speak the names of anyone you'd like held in prayer this day. You may speak their names silently or loud, and you may speak them now. And so for all those whose names were spoken here this day, I know that God is in the midst of every situation and circumstance. God is right where each person is, right here and right now. God is everywhere present. And so knowing this truth, I release this word, knowing that it is already done in the mind of God. It's already done in the mind of God. And I just say, thank you, Father, Mother God. Thank you, Infinite Presence. Thank you, Divine Mother. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I simply allow it to be. And so it is. Amen.